Hello, everyone, and welcome to Setting Up QuickBooks for Your Law Firm. My name is Crystalline Shelton, and I will be your facilitator for this webinar. We're going to wait just a couple more minutes to let folks join, and then we'll get started shortly. After the hour, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to Setting Up QuickBooks for Your Law Firm. My name is Crystalline Shelton, and I will be your facilitator for this webinar. We are very excited about the latest release in our niche book series, Mastering QuickBooks for Law Firms. Before we dive in, I would like to introduce Ed Thaney, Managing Partner, who will provide you with a brief introduction about our firm and related entities.
Thanks, Crystalline, and welcome everybody to our webinar. My name is Ed Thaney, and I'm the president of TLR, and I'd like to tell you about us and all our other related entities. TLR has been around for more than 30 years, predominantly now publishing QuickBooks training guides. We publish both student and instructor guides and sell them to colleges and universities throughout the country. All the books have practice files, and if by any chance you are an instructor, you can have access to PowerPoints that go along with each chapter of every book we have. Currently, we have available 2020 and 2021 QuickBooks training guides. There are 3 various guides that provide step-by-step learning for beginners, intermediaries, and advanced students. We also offer enterprise section for QuickBooks, which is widely used in the legal industry. We began publishing industry-specific guides, such as QuickBooks for contractors, and most recently, as to why many of you are here today, QuickBooks for law firms. We are currently working on a training guide for QBO, which is QuickBooks Online. I'm also the managing partner of Thaney & Associates, CPAs, with 5 offices in New York and Florida, and practicing in over 35 states with strategic planning, succession planning, and tax planning. Our firm is heavily involved in all types of law firms, and we do even have a quarterly legal newsletter that we will be putting you on the list and sending you. And if you don't care to have it, just unsubscribe, but try it out. And we'll have you on there for every quarter. We are also certified valuators, which is helpful in succession planning and estate planning. We get involved with many aspects of M&A transactions. We own a franchise of Transworld Business Advisors, which is a business brokerage company. They have offices in 50 states and 3 countries. Supporting Strategies is another franchise that we own, which is comprised of virtual CPAs, MBAs, working virtually for businesses as either office managers, controllers, and CFOs. As far as assistance with financing, Clear Choice Capital is loans, lines of credits, and commercial in the commercial lending arena, and also in the SBA arena, Small Business Administration. It's also a great help or succession planning. Elections LLC.
Ed, you're breaking up there a bit. Can you hear me? Ed, are you?
Years experience in this arena. Visit the website and you can contact us, or you can see the amount of books that we have under QuickBooks that you could be obtaining too. That's enough about us. Enjoy the webinar. Thank you, Crystalline.
Thanks, Ed. Sorry about that, guys. It's breaking up just a bit there. So again, I've already introduced myself. I'm Crystalline Shelton. I just want to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we will dive right into our webinar. I am the content strategist here at TLR. I joined the team in August of 2019. I am a certified public accountant, and I am certified advanced QuickBooks Pro Advisor in both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. I've got more than 20 years in the accounting field, which is the field I majored in, and I've got 10 plus years working with small business owners. I currently teach online for UCLA Extension as an adjunct instructor, teach bookkeeping essentials, and I also teach QuickBooks, and I've been doing that for more than 10 years. So today we are going to talk about how to set up QuickBooks for your law firm. The topics that we'll cover will include the Easy Step interview. This is sort of just a 12 to 15 question process that we go through in QuickBooks to provide information so that the QuickBooks file can be set up to be custom to your actual law firm. We're going to talk about how to customize preferences in QuickBooks. This is basically how you turn features on and off in QuickBooks. Customizing the chart of accounts list, which is very important in terms of categorizing your business transactions. How to customize the items list, and that will include how to add items, how to edit items, how to delete them. And then finally, we'll wrap up with using class tracking, which can help you when it comes to reporting. We also have plenty of time at the end to cover any questions that you have. In addition, throughout the webinar, if you've got a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box or the Q&A box. We've got Morgan, who's monitoring questions, and if it's applicable to the topic that I'm referring to, she will definitely interrupt me so I can get your question answered. If it's a general question, then we'll wait till the end to answer it, but definitely, as soon as it pops into your head, go ahead and type it in so that you don't forget it. So with that said, we're gonna go ahead and dive right into QuickBooks. I'm just gonna do a switch over to the program so we can get started here. So after installing QuickBooks on your computer, in order to set up the company file, this is pretty much the first screen that you're going to come to. And so typically you'll select the For Myself option. What this does is if you don't currently have an Intuit account, it's going to take you through the steps of setting one up. And I believe you have an option to set it up later, but there comes a point where it only allows you to delay it for so long, and then you'll have to set up the ID. It's just a way for Intuit to sort of identify you and have all the products and services that you use located under one user ID and password. If you are a bookkeeper or an accountant and you are setting up a file for a client, then you would want to select this option for someone else. And then obviously, if you've already got an Intuit account, then you'll just go ahead and log in. And if you don't, then you'll go ahead and set up as well. So when it comes to setting up a QuickBooks file, you've got 3 different options. You've got a detailed start option. That is the easy step interview, and that's the one we're going to use in this webinar. You have the option to create a new company file based on an existing one. So the situation that comes to mind in terms of why you would use this, let's say you have an existing QuickBooks file and you've been using it for a while, and maybe you've gone through 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 bookkeepers, and it's gotten to the point where the file is not clean, it's sort of a mess, and you want to start over. This would be a great option, create from an existing file, because what it'll do is it will allow you to bring over information that is still good. For example, like your company or client list or your vendor list, right? Those things that are still okay and you don't want to have to create them from scratch. You could just copy them over from the existing company file, and then start from there. So that's an example of why you may want to use that option. The third option here is if you are currently using another accounting software program like Quicken, and you want to convert that data or move that data over from your existing system into QuickBooks, then they've got a conversion tool that they built in that allows you to do that. And that's where this third option comes into play. So we're going to go ahead and click on Detailed Start. And for those of you that already have received your textbook, I am going to be referring to that if you want to follow along. So I am starting out at the bottom of page 2-2. So this first screen is requiring that we enter some information about the firm that we want to set up. So our particular fictitious firm is called Legal Eagles, Inc. One of the nice things about QuickBooks is, and you'll have to get into the habit of this, is using the tab key. So I just type Legal Eagles Inc. here. I'm going to press tab, and QuickBooks will automatically populate the legal name field. So it just saves me a few keystrokes. So if you can, get used to using that tab key, because it can really be helpful. So we'll type in the tax ID number here. We've got our business address. You want to go ahead and put in here as well. And this information is used on your invoice forms and other forms that you create in QuickBooks. So it's important not to skip over it. I know sometimes people are in a hurry and they just want to get started. It only takes a few minutes to enter this information, and then you don't have to worry about it. And so I definitely recommend you take the time to do it, and that way you don't have to come back in and do it later. You'd only have to come in and make any changes if you need to. And then we've got the website. If I can type. All right, cool. So one of the questions that I often get asked is, what if you have more than one business? So typically the rule of thumb is it's one QuickBooks file per tax ID. So if you've got a different tax ID number for the second business or third business, then you want to go ahead and set up a separate company file for that business. So we'll go ahead and click next. And so the next question is selecting your industry. And so QuickBooks will use this information to create a template for your chart of accounts list. We're going to talk about the chart of accounts in a few minutes, but basically you just click the drop down arrow until you find the industry that's exactly your industry or that's closest to it. So for law firms, that industry is going to be legal services. So we'll go ahead and select that and click next. I think I hit next too many times. That's why I got that message. All right, so how's your company organized? So again, how is your firm set up? Did you set it up with one owner, which would be a sole proprietor? Do you have a partnership where there's more than two or more owners? We've got the LLC option, which if you click this drop down arrow, there's an option to select a single member LLC, or if you've got multiple members, then you want to select that option. Corporation, S Corp, and nonprofit. Typically, you want to select one of these options. Your firm or your business should not fall into this other or none. The only time I would recommend that option is if you decide to use QuickBooks for your personal home finances. In that case, then other or none would be appropriate. So for our law firm, it's an S corporation. So we're going to go ahead and select that and click next. The first month of your fiscal year. So QuickBooks is able to allow you to use a calendar year, which would be January through December, or a fiscal year, which is pretty much any 12-month period other than January through December. So for example, UCLA, their beginning of their fiscal year is July 1st, and then the year ends on June 30th. So for them, the first month for their year would be July. So for our fictitious company, it's the same as the calendar year. So we're going to go ahead and just leave the default January selected and click next here. Setting up an administrator password is very important. It protects your information. For example, if someone gets a hold of your file or you lose your laptop and they can access your computer, if you've got your file password protected, they won't be able to access your financial data. So I absolutely recommend setting this up. For the purposes of demonstration, we're not going to do that now, but you definitely want to go ahead and set up an administrator password. Create company files. So at this point, QuickBooks wants to go ahead and save what we've done so far, and then we will continue with a few more questions included in the Easy Step interview here. So what QuickBooks will do is automatically default the name of the company to your business name. Now, I've been doing quite a few demos of Legal Eagles Inc. So I know for a fact that that name has already been used. So I'm just going to put the number 3 at the end. So you can accept the default name or you can change it before you actually save it. But it's going to default to a QuickBooks folder that's already been created on your computer when you installed the software. So we'll go ahead and click save, and that will take just a couple of seconds to save what we've done so far, and then we'll be able to move on. Morgan, do we have any questions so far?
Yeah, we have a couple. The first one is, I know you already addressed how many businesses we can set up with the tax ID, but how many different users can we set up in QuickBooks?
So when it comes to users, that's a great question. It depends on which version of QuickBooks you purchase. So if you purchase the QuickBooks Pro, that version of QuickBooks allows up to 3 users. And so when you purchase it, it'll include 1 user, which means you can purchase an additional 2 licenses for that version of QuickBooks. The next version up from Pro is Premier. That allows you to have 5 simultaneous users. And then the high-end QuickBooks product Enterprise, I believe, allows you to have 25 or more. So great question.
Thanks. And one more, do you know if you can convert a PC law file?
PC law file to QuickBooks? Is that the question, I'm assuming?
I believe so.
Yeah. I'm not sure because it's PC law and accounting software. I guess that would be my question back to that person.
Yes, to start the new file from PC Law Info, Legal Accounting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's an accounting software, I think you can use that other option that I showed you guys to go through the steps and tell the program what software you're using. I don't know if PC Law is on the list. So that's something that you'll probably have to contact Intuit to find out about. One note about converting data from other systems. If you've ever converted from an old system to a new system, you know that it's never perfect, right? So what's going to happen is when you convert the data, even using a conversion tool like what Intuit has built in, there's going to be some amount of cleanup. And so just keep in mind, because the software you're using keeps data in different fields from where QuickBooks, right, would have them, just because they're two different software products. So in some cases, it's really a good idea to have an expert in QuickBooks, maybe a consultant, to come in and help you determine if it's worth it to convert the data, or if you would be better off exporting some data to Excel and then importing it into QuickBooks, because that's also another option. Okay. So I hope that helps, but if there's follow-up questions, definitely we can address them.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all for now.
Okay, thanks, Morgan. All right, so now we're going to dive into customizing QuickBooks a little bit more here. So this next question is, what do you sell? So we need to tell QuickBooks, what are we going to be selling? Services only, products only, or both services and products? So typically law firms sell services. I'm sure there's some exceptions to where some firms sell products as well. The selection that you make here isn't permanent, meaning if I select services now, that doesn't mean I can't sell products later on. You absolutely can. But what'll happen, instead of coming back to the easy step interview, you will make the change in the preferences section, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So we'll select services only for now and click next. Do you charge sales tax? So again, if you sell products and you're required to charge sales tax, QuickBooks is set up to actually keep track of that sales tax for you. And so that's a nice feature to have, so that you know when it's time to actually pay that sales tax, you know that the amount's going to be correct because QuickBooks is keeping track of it for you. So for our purposes, we're going to say no, since we said we don't sell products for this particular firm. So we'll click next. Do you want to create estimates in QuickBooks? An estimate is also known as a quote or a bid, right? These forms are basically used to record the details of a job or a project for a new or an existing customer. These forms aren't required, but it's actually recommended that you use estimates for a case or a matter that you have a set budget for. Using estimates allows you to keep track of the income and expenses. At any point in time, you can run reports to compare the estimate of the case or matter to the actuals to determine if you are coming in over or under budget. So we will go ahead and actually select yes for this particular option. Using statements. So statements is another way to bill clients, right? You can create an invoice, you could create a sales receipt, or you could create a billing statement. And a billing statement primarily is just a summary of all the charges for a particular time period, usually a month. And then below the charges, you'll have all the payments that the client has made. And so the bottom line balance due is what the customer owes. And so that statement would be sent out so that the customer can review it and remit payment. So for this particular feature, we'll go ahead and say, yes, we're going to use statements and click next. Progress invoicing. Progress invoicing basically allows you to bill customers in installments. So let's say, for example, you've got a big project, a big case, and your estimate's about maybe $50,000. Instead of waiting until the end to bill the client, you can actually bill in multiple installments. So you would create an estimate in QuickBooks, and then from that estimate, you would invoice the customer, let's say, for example, after every milestone. So maybe your agreement is, hey, we're going to bill you in 5 installments of 10,000 each, right? And so as you complete a milestone, you're able to invoice the customer against that estimate, and QuickBooks will keep track of that for you. And so that's all progress invoicing is. We'll go ahead and say, yes, we want to go ahead and keep track of it that way, and click next. Managing your bills that you owe. Really, there's no decision to be made here. You absolutely want to manage your bills in QuickBooks. And so we'll go ahead and leave the default there as a yes. Tracking time in QuickBooks. So you are able to track time spent on cases by associates, partners, and other personnel in your firm. This will allow you to bill customers for that time that's spent. So we'll go ahead and say yes to this. And tracking time is covered in detail in the textbook in Chapter 5, just for your reference there. Do you have employees? So QuickBooks allows you to keep track of the hours employees work. You're able to process end-to-end payroll. That means setting up the employees, salary, hourly, entering their deductions, for example, maybe 401k contributions or garnishments. QuickBooks can handle it all when it comes to payroll. And so the key here is if you decide to manage your payroll in QuickBooks, you will have to sign up for a payroll subscription. And that will be an additional monthly fee that Intuit charges you. And so let me tell you what you get with that. Basically, depending on the package that you choose, but all of the packages, the primary reason why you pay for it is because it includes updates to the payroll tax tables. And so in order for your paychecks to be calculated correctly, you've got to have access to the latest and greatest tax tables. You don't want to manually calculate payroll checks, trust me. As if it's wrong, there's a lot of interest and penalties that come along with that. So we'll go ahead and select yes. Also, QuickBooks allows you to keep track of payments that you make to 1099 contractors, right? So anyone who's not an employee but works, does some work for you, you can actually keep track of them as well so that you can generate that 1099 form at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year and send it out to them. So we'll go ahead and select that and click next. And so in the next screen here, it talks about the start date. And this basically is just when do you plan to start tracking your finances in QuickBooks, right? So the most ideal time to do this, obviously, is at the beginning of the year, right? And so even though we're here at June 15th, let's say I decide, you know what, I want to go back to the beginning of the year and enter all of my data into QuickBooks so that the entire year 2021 will be in QuickBooks. So then you can do that. However, that might not be feasible for some of you. It might just be too much data that you have to enter. And so in that case, you might want to go with this second option here. And if you do that, I just recommend that you choose a like the beginning of a period. So let's say, for example, this is June 15th. So ideally, I would say you go with July 1st as your start date, because then you'll know January through June is in your old system, And then July 1st through the end of the year is in QuickBooks. So I recommend something like that. Just kind of draw a line in the sand where it makes sense to keep up with, which system your data is in if you decide to do that. So we'll go ahead and select beginning of this fiscal year and click next here. And so based on the legal services industry that we chose, QuickBooks is recommending the accounts here that have a check mark for our chart of accounts list. So what's nice is you're not starting from scratch with a chart of accounts. QuickBooks is providing us with accounts. And let's just say you saw an account here and you're like, oh, I know I'm going to use that, like business license and permits. I simply just put my mouse here and click, and it adds the check mark for me. And then keep in mind, you definitely can go through the chart of accounts later on, and I'll show you this, and add new accounts that are missing, delete accounts that you know you're not going to use. So for example, this is one of my pet peeves with QuickBooks is, and some of you might be able to relate to this, is they have an account here called Ask My Accountant, and it's always checked. So I always remove that check mark because what happens is that account just ends up being a catch-all. And so you never want to put an account on your chart of accounts that people can just throw transactions in because they don't know what to do with them. That just ends up being a nightmare for your accountant and for you at the end of the year when it's time to go through the financials and report the taxes. So I always recommend you remove that account. And so for now, we'll go ahead and accept everything else and click next. And that's it. The Easy Step interview is complete. So we will click to go to setup. And this will open up another window. So what happens here, let me see if I can drag this here. So here, one of the other great things about QuickBooks is, I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago, is you're able to import data from an Excel spreadsheet. And so at this particular point, if you wanted to, you could import your clients, people that you do business with. You could import your products and services list, also known as items, into QuickBooks. And so that would save you the time of manually entering these things one by one. And so definitely that's something that you can do. And so we're not going to do that for this particular demonstration, but it is an option. So we'll click this button that says Start Working. And then we've got, oh, this is the pop-up. Okay. So this is what I was telling you before about if you decide not to sign up or not to go through the process of setting up an ID. So let me select this and see if it'll let me get out of doing this right now. I think it will. I'm just going to put that in and see what happens. Yeah, there we go. So again, you want to go through this process because you do want to sign in. Just for the purposes of the demo, I don't want to sign in. It's just going to bring up a bunch of other things. So I'll say sign in later. And so here's where I get the option to do it in 2 days or 7 days. So always go for the most time, right? All right. So now we've got a couple additional pop-ups. One of them is the new features pop-up. Whoops. And so that pretty much details like what are the new features in this version of QuickBooks. So it's hiding behind this WebEx window, but I usually just close that out and then I'll show you. Okay. We'll give the WebEx thing a minute to hide itself. Let's hide that. There we go. All right. So this is a window that details the new features. So I'll close that out. But if you wanted to access that, it is available here behind the help menu, and then there's new features there. Okay. So this is the QuickBooks homepage for those of you that are new to QuickBooks. At the top, you'll see your company name. You'll typically see the version of QuickBooks that you're using right next to it. So as you can see, I'm using the Accountant Desktop 2021 edition. And so you'll be able to see that there. So just some navigation basics. It's sort of divided into what we call QuickBooks Centers. So right here at the top is what we call the Vendor Center. And so you could click that button and go to the Vendor Center, and everything related to your vendors and suppliers would be there. So if you wanted to enter a bill, if you wanted to pay a bill, if you wanted to add a new vendor, that's where you would go. Same with the Customer Center. Everything for customers is located behind here, and then same for employees. Now, another way to access these centers is basically here up at the top. These are more like the pull down menus you're used to for like the Microsoft products that we use. So we've got the customers, we've got vendors, we've got employees. So what you'll find is you'll just have to figure out like what's your favorite way to access information. And we've also got here on the lesson, we've also got this information on the left nav bar as well. The other way that you can access data is with keyboard shortcuts. So notice under list for chart of accounts, the keyboard shortcut is Control A. And so you'll notice that certain tasks have a keyboard shortcut associated with it. And so again, if that's something you prefer, then you can certainly use keyboard shortcuts to navigate around QuickBooks. All right, so before we move into the next topic, which is setting up preferences, Morgan, do we have any questions?
We do have a chart of accounts related question.
Okay.
If my accountant or CPA has a chart of accounts that they want me to use, can I import it instead of adding each account one by one?
Absolutely, yes. So for the chart of accounts, you can access it here as well. There's an icon that says chart of accounts. So if I click on that, we're going to talk about the chart of accounts in a few minutes, but I just want to show you. Let's see. Yeah. So under the account menu, there's an option that says import from Excel. And so you would click on that option and then walk through the steps to import your chart of accounts into QuickBooks. Now, what I recommend, it might sound like a pain, but what you're more than likely going to have to do is go through and delete these accounts here. And actually, a better thought is during the Easy Step interview, if you guys recall, one of the things, I'm trying to think if it's under industry or I'll have to go back and look, but you'll definitely want to delete the existing chart of accounts list, because otherwise you could end up with duplicates, or you'll have accounts in here that your accountant doesn't want you to have. So if you don't want to do that work, then that's something that you could have your CPA or accountant do. They'll go through, delete all these existing accounts, and then import their chart of accounts list. And so that might be something that you want to have them do before you obviously even get started with entering transactions. But yeah, great question. All right, so let's talk about preferences. Preferences are ways for you to turn features on and off in QuickBooks. So I'm going to close out of the chart of accounts for now. Preferences are located behind the edit menu. So if you click on edit and go down to preferences, man, I'm having a hard time with my mouse today. So the way preferences is organized is all the categories are here on the left. And so if I stuck with accounting, then you'll see there's two tabs here on the right. There's a My Preferences tab, and there's a Company Preferences tab. My Preferences only impacts the user that is logged in. So it's a personal preference, meaning no one else is impacted if you're on this My Preference tab. If you're on the Company Preferences tab, that impacts all users because it impacts the entire QuickBooks file. So as you can imagine, the only person that's going to have access to change company preferences is the administrative user, okay? So if you're not an administrative user, you won't even see this tab, or if you see it, everything will be grayed out. You won't even have access to change it, okay? And so if you are tracking with me in the textbook, I am now going to flip over to page 3-2, and we'll go through a few of these preferences here. So starting with the accounting tab, we're going to go over, company preferences. And so down here at the bottom, we've got a couple of warnings. So the first one is warn if transactions are 90 days in the past. I typically recommend that, especially if you're setting up your QuickBooks file and you're going to be entering historical data, right? That may be 90 days in the past. So our example, we're going back to January of this year. So we're definitely going to be entering historical data. So we would want to remove that, because if we don't, every time we enter a transaction that's past 90 days, QuickBooks is going to give us a warning. Now, true, you could also change this default. So you could do either, or you could turn this off, or maybe you could, increase the number of days here so that you don't get that message. So that's just definitely a recommendation I always make. Class tracking. So class tracking is something that we want to turn on. Class tracking is a feature in QuickBooks that allows you to keep track of your transactions, like by department, by location, or for a law firm, maybe you want to keep track of transactions by partner, by associate. And so it's a great feature to have, especially when it comes to reporting. And so we'll turn that feature on, and then later on, I will show you how you add a class and how it works in QuickBooks, okay? So that's all for the accounting tab. Let's jump down to the general tab real quick. So each time you make a change, you'll get this pop-up that says you made changes. Do you wish to save them? Absolutely, we do. And now we're on the general tab. So on the general tab for personal preferences, something that I typically do for clients is turn off pop-up messages for products and services. This is basically, QuickBooks trying to sell you maybe a payroll subscription, or maybe checks. If you need to print checks, they actually sell checks forms like your bank does. And so if you just don't want to get those annoying messages, you can turn them off. It's a personal preference, obviously, because every user, may not want it turned off. And so that's what that is. Time and expenses. Let's jump down to that. Looks like we'll have to scroll down. That's at the bottom. So time and expenses. So as you can see, there are no personal preferences. Everything for time and expenses is a company preference. And here we just want to go ahead and say, let's see. Well, that's correct. So we'll go ahead and say track reimburse expenses as income, and then we definitely want mark all expenses as billable, as that's typically how it works for firms. So we'll leave that set. And then last but not least, we'll go up to the reports and graphs preference. So for reporting, for those of you that don't have an accounting or bookkeeping background, there are two basically accounting methods. And you've probably heard of them. One's accrual, one's cash. And so in this particular preference, by selecting one of these, you're just setting a default so that anytime you run a report, it will always be run using whatever basis you've selected here. Now, the nice thing about QuickBooks is you can also select the basis directly on the report when you run it. So let's just say you have accrual set here as your default, but when you're running a report, you're interested in seeing, well, what does this look like if it was cash basis? You can actually run it and select cash basis on each report. If you're not sure what basis you are, ask your CPA or accountant, and then that way you can make the correct selection when it comes to the default here. So we'll go ahead and click OK to save all of those changes that we've made. All right, so now we're going to dive into discussing how to customize our chart of accounts. So the chart of accounts list is basically used to categorize your daily business transactions. It's comprised of 5 main categories: assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expenses. So every business transaction will fit into one of those categories. It's really, really important, I can't say it enough, that the chart of accounts is set up properly. The reason is the way you set up the chart of accounts determines the accuracy of your financial statements. Okay, so it's worth it to hire a consultant or have your CPA help you set this up to make sure it's right. Because once you start entering transactions, you want to make sure that they're going to the right place so that your reports are correct. So to access the chart of accounts, which we did previously, you can go to List and select Chart of Accounts. Okay, yeah. So this is the chart of accounts here. And so those 5 categories that I mentioned to you, assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expense, they will be located under the type column here. And so what we want to do is go ahead and go back to preferences for 1 second. So before I do that, so looking at this chart of accounts list, as you can see, there's just an account name right now. But some accountants and CPAs prefer that you also use a unique number with each account. And so it just really depends. It's really not required, but some CPAs and accountants prefer it. And so what I'll do, just in case some of you don't have your textbook yet, is, let's see here. All right. Morgan, can you see my presentation again, or are you still seeing QuickBooks?
I still see QuickBooks.
Okay. So hold on 1 second. I want to share. Okay, I hid my toolbar for Zoom. Now I'm like, where is it? Sorry, guys. 1 second here. Let's see. It's hiding from me. Oh, wow, really? Okay, if I hide my toolbar, how do I get it back? Do you know, Morgan? Where
um,
is- Sorry, guys. Okay. If you've got your textbook, great. Turn to page 3-5. If you don't have it, refer to page 3-5 after this webinar. I don't want to waste the time going back trying to figure out how to share the presentation again, because I know you guys' time is valuable. But basically, there is a standard numbering scheme for the chart of accounts. And so the chart that's located at the top of page 3-5 basically has the account numbers grouped by the account category. So for example, if you were setting up an account that was an asset, your account number should be in the range of 10,000 to account 19999, 19,999. And so it's just sort of an accountant's thing. This is sort of the standard. If you're setting up accounts, this is the grouping for them. And then when we actually add a new chart of accounts or an account to the chart of accounts, I'll show you, how to use the numbers. But this is basically like the standard approach to using account numbers. If you don't use account numbers, that's great. It's actually not required. But like I said, if you work with a CPA or an accountant, don't be surprised if they provide you with a list that has account numbers, okay? So with that said, if you decide or if you need to use account numbers, you need to go ahead and turn them on in QuickBooks. So to do that, we're going to go back to Preferences. And this is located in the accounting category on the Company Preferences tab. And you're going to click here where it says Use Account Numbers. Require accounts will always be selected. You never want to remove that. The other thing we're going to add here or select is Show Lowest Sub-Account Only. So what this means basically is if you have an account that has sub-accounts, you only want the sub-accounts to show. So to give you an example, typically automobile expense is an account that you definitely want to set up sub-accounts for. And your sub-accounts would typically be gas, repairs, and maybe like registration fees or something like that. And so instead of on the chart of accounts, the automobile expense account showing, right, which is your main account, you only want to show the subs, gas, repairs, and registration fees, because those are the accounts that you want used in transactions. And so by selecting this show lowest sub account only, that's what that will do, is just make sure only the subs are showing, okay? So we definitely want to use account number, so we'll click OK here. And as you can see, account numbers now automatically appear next to each account. All right, so you want to turn them on, and then now when you add a new account, you will have to assign an account number. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. All right, so we're going to go ahead and add a new account so that you guys can see how that works. And it's going to be a trust checking account for one of our clients. So as you guys can see, QuickBooks has already added a client trust account. And so what you want to do when you're setting up your QuickBooks file is you want to add a sub account for each client when it comes to client trust accounts so that you can keep track of it. And so at the very bottom of the screen, this is pretty much where the menu is, if you will, for any type of list, whether it's this chart of accounts list or whether it's the products and services list, which we'll go through next. And so if you click the account button, this is where you can add a new account. As you can see, you can click new, or you can do the keyboard shortcut Control N. Edit an account, delete account, make an account inactive. So we'll start with adding a new account. This next screen, we have to tell QuickBooks what type of account are we adding, okay? So your options are an income account, an expense account, a fixed asset account. And what's nice is if I click on these, it will tell me what type of an account belongs in this category, which is nice if you're not sure. So we're going to add a bank account. So we'll click continue. And so the first field that we need to select or enter is the account number. So we're going to assign account number 10910 for this first account. And so this is going to be the Lucille Ball Trust checking account. Okay. And so it's a good idea to put just a brief description. Actually, before I jump to that, we need to make this a sub account. Remember, I said we're going to make this a sub account of our client trust account. So you definitely want to do that because it's associated with this big client trust account. And then we'll go ahead and put in the description real quick. Funds received from client for legal services. Okay, perfect. If you wanted to, you could add a bank account number and routing number. I typically don't recommend that. Or if you wanted to do that, just add like the last four digits of the account number if that's something you wanted to do. We're not going to enter an opening balance. We'll show you how to do the deposits for that later. So we'll go ahead and say save and close this account. And anytime you're setting up an account, a bank account, I should say, you're going to get this pop-up that says set up bank feed. A bank feed is basically allowing you to connect your actual bank account with QuickBooks. And so when you walk through this process, what it does is it allows you to go out to your financial institution's website, log in with your user ID and password. And then once you make the connection, your transactions will automatically download into QuickBooks. So a lot of people like this feature because they don't have to manually enter anything here. And so that's a feature, you know, down the line, you might want to do that. If you're just starting out, I wouldn't recommend it because it can be a bit confusing. It's not as simple as, oh, I'll just connect it and everything will go into QuickBooks and I won't have to do anything. Not at all. There's some management there that you have to do. And so initially, don't connect anything until you really understand how QuickBooks works. And then you can always go back and connect an account later on. So we've got the Lucille Ball Trust checking account set up. As you can see, it is slightly indented under the client trust account, and that's because it is a sub account, okay? So in addition to setting up client trust checking accounts, you will need to add an accounts payable account to keep track of your bills and payments made on behalf of clients. In addition, you will need an AP account to track bills and expenses for your firm, okay? Finally, we're going to also create a client trust liability account. This account's going to be used to keep track of all client deposits and costs. So we're going to walk through and show you how to set each of these up next. If you are following along in the text, I am on page 3-11. So we'll go back to the account button. We're going to select new again. This time, the account type that we want to set up is accounts payable. So accounts payable is located within the other account types. So we'll select that and then we'll select accounts payable. and click continue here. And so first thing we've got to do is enter our account number, 20,000. And so the name of this is going to be Law Firm Accounts Payable. And so this account will be used to track bills and expenses for the firm only. So nothing for the client will go into this account. Okay, so we've got a couple more accounts to set up. So we're going to go ahead, instead of selecting save and close, we'll do save and new. That leaves this screen open so that we can go on to the next account. So the next account we're going to set up is 20100. It is going to be called Client Trust Accounts Payable. And this account is going to be used to track bills and expenses for all clients. Okay. And then we're going to select Save and New and set up our last account here. So this account number 20101 is going to be called Lucille Ball Client Trust AP account. So if you didn't guess this already, it is going to be a sub of the Client Trust Accounts Payable, okay? And so we'll just put a brief description here to track bills and expenses for clients. All right, so if we click Save and Close this time, it'll take us back to the chart of accounts, right? So the three accounts we just set up, Law Firm Accounts Payable, Client Trust Accounts Payable, and then the sub that we set up, Lucille Ball Client Trust AP. AP is just short for Accounts Payable, okay? So those are the three accounts that we just set up. And so that's basically how you add a new account to your chart of accounts. It's fairly easy and straightforward. The next thing I want to show you is how to edit an existing account on the chart of accounts. So if we go back to the checking account that we set up for Lucille Ball, and we decided that we wanted to, go ahead and add the bank account information. We just thought it'd be best to go ahead and put it in there. Someone said they just wanted it there so they can reference it. To edit an account, you want to click on the account once to highlight it, like I have here. A lot of people double click, and what ends up happening is it opens up the register for that account. And so it'll happen to you, you'll do it on accident, but basically you don't want to double click. You want to click once, go down to the account button and select edit account. And so it brings me back to this window, right, where we first created the account. And I just want to enter an account number right quick. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out, because a lot of people get confused, is you never want to change this account type unless you have not recorded any transactions. If you haven't recorded transactions, you can change this. But once you've recorded transactions, you do not want to touch this, and QuickBooks won't allow it. The other thing I want to point out is this account is a sub account, right, of the client trust account. That client trust account is a bank account type. And so let's say, because I just want you to see the error, let's say I decide, oh, you know what, I think this should be an accounts receivable account. QuickBooks is going to give you a warning that you are not allowed to change the type. Now, granted, I have not recorded any transactions, but the reason why I can't change this is because it is a sub-account, and that sub-account is a bank account type, right? So all your subs have to have the same account type as your main account. I'm gonna have to hide this because it's driving me nuts. But all your sub-accounts have to have the same bank account or account type as the main account. So that's the reason why it wouldn't let me change that, all right? All right, so let's save and close that change we made. Deleting accounts. So again, same rule of thumb. If you have not recorded a transaction or you have not used an account in a transaction, it's probably a better way to say it, then you can delete an account because there's no transactions. But once you've recorded transactions, you are not allowed to delete an account in QuickBooks. And that's really just for obvious reasons. If you've got transactions in there, they have been reported on financial statements. And so you don't want to just go in and be able to delete accounts because then it's going to destroy your financial statements. So that's the reason why. But let's just say you have an account that's listed on a chart of accounts and you don't plan to use it any longer. So for whatever reason, you've decided that you're not going to use it. And so you can do what's called inactivate an account. And so inactivating an account will leave the account in QuickBooks, but it'll remove it from the list so that it's not selected. So if I just selected an account to inactivate, let's just say this business license and permits, I've decided I'm going to inactivate it. And so again, you want to select the account like I have here that you want to inactivate. Click on the account button down here and then select make account inactive. When I select that, that account completely disappears from the chart of accounts list. So later on down the road, if I decide I want to activate it again, it's very simple. Down here at the very bottom of the screen, to the right of the attach button here, there's this little box. That box next to include inactive means you want to see all inactive accounts. So when I select that, as you can see, the business license and permits account shows up here with an X next to it. And all I have to do is simply put my mouse over that X, click once, and it's activated. Okay. So that's sort of a way around not being able to delete accounts that you've used in transactions. And then just to be, I think I skipped over deleting, but deleting is a simple, and I double clicked. Man, I'm having a hard time with this thing today. Deleting is as simple as highlighting the account, just like I did with editing. Sorry, let me go back to the chart of accounts. So court costs. So highlighting the account I want to delete, clicking the account button, and select delete account. It just wants to double check, am I sure this is what I want to do? Yes, it is. And click OK, and the account's gone. So as long as you haven't used the account in a transaction, you're fine. All right, so that's how you add an account to the chart of accounts, edit an account on the chart of accounts, delete an account on the chart of accounts, and then activate an account on the chart of accounts. So that's basically managing your chart. So before we talk about the products and services list, Morgan, are there any questions?
No, we don't have any other questions at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, customizing the items list. So in QuickBooks, you'll hear the term item. It's also referred to as the products and services list. So for example, this icon says items and services. So that's the list that we're referring to when we say items. So we'll go ahead and go into here. Now on the items list, you will have to create your own items, right? Because QuickBooks doesn't really know what your services are that you sell. And so you will have to spend some time adding your products and services here. It's pretty much the same in terms of the mechanics, very similar to the chart of accounts where your menu is at the very bottom of the screen. We'll click on item and then we'll select new to create a new item. Again, same keyboard shortcut Control N. So this is where you can add a new item, you can edit a new item, you can duplicate an item or delete, and again, make inactive is an option as well. So we'll click new. And when you're creating a new item, you have to select an item type. So the types that you have to choose from are service, non-inventory part, other charge, subtotal, group, discount, and payment. Typically for a law firm, you're going to stick with service items, and probably other charges are going to be like your primary item types that you use. Okay. So we'll go ahead and walk through how to set up an item. And we'll set up an item called client expense firm legal fees. All right, so we'll set that up. So that's going to be a service. And I am on page 3-22 for those of you following along in your textbook. Client expense firm legal fees. So you want to go ahead and click this box next to this service is used in assemblies or is performed by a subcontractor or partner. And so you want to check this box if an item is going to be used to track income and expenses. So if you notice here, this side says purchase, which is the expense side, and this side says sales, which is the income side. And so we definitely want to set this item up in that manner. And so we're going to call this legal fees on both sides. We're not going to include a cost or a sales price because this is going to vary. But what we do want to do is link this to our client trust liability account, which I did not set up. Good. So if you get to a point where you're going along and you're setting up items and you realize you don't have an account for something, you can actually click in that field, go to the very top of the drop down, and you have an option to add new. So let me just sort of back up. One of the main reasons why you don't have to have an accounting or bookkeeping background, or you don't have to know debits and credits, is because in QuickBooks, whenever you set up a product or service, or i.e. an item, you always have to link it to an account on the chart of accounts list. Why is this? This tells QuickBooks what to do with that transaction. And so in this particular case, we need to tell QuickBooks each time we sell this service, right? Client expense firm legal fees, we want you to record it to this account. And so I want this to go to an account that we have not set up yet. And so we're going to go ahead and click add new. And so let me go back since I skipped that somehow. Here it is. All right. So if you go to the top of page 3-16, The account that we want to set up is a other current liability account called Client Trust Liabilities. So let's see, other current liability. The account number is 25,000. And this is going to be Client Trust Liabilities. All right, so we'll save and close that. And so now that account is populated in this field. You will not be able to add a new item to QuickBooks without completing this field. It's a required field, and so you will have to select an account so QuickBooks knows what to do with those transactions. So now let me flip back over. And so on the expense account, it's 25,000. For the income account, we're going to use the same account, the Client Trust Liabilities account. So both of these fields need to be complete before you can actually save the item. And so we're going to go ahead and save this by clicking OK. And now, as you can see here on our items list, we've got our new account, Client Expense Firm Legal Fees, set up here. All right, so we're gonna do one more. On page 3-24, we're gonna set up an account called Client Expense Expert Consultant. Okay, so we'll click on the item button, click New. This is going to be a service as well. Client Expense. Expert. Consultant. Awesome. So we're going to click this box again so we can put the income and expense side here. And so we'll just call this expert consultant. And so it'll be the same on both sides. And this will also go to the client trust liabilities account like the previous item did here. All righty. Okay, so let's click OK to save that. And now you can see both of these items are listed here on our items list. So as I mentioned, you can edit accounts just like, or I'm sorry, edit items just like we did accounts by simply selecting the item, clicking the item button down here at the bottom. You can select edit if you need to make changes. If you want to duplicate the item, you can select that option. You can delete the item as long as you have not recorded transactions. And if you have recorded transactions, you can make the item inactive. Okay. All right. So that is basically how you set up, basically add, edit, delete, and inactivate items, also known as your products and services. So our final topic for today is class tracking. I mentioned it earlier because we had to turn on that preference, right? So just to kind of recap, if you've forgotten, back in preferences, in the accounting section, there was a feature called class tracking. So step one to using class tracking is you do have to turn on the feature. And so that's simply coming to preferences, putting the check marks here to go ahead and turn that feature on. And then once it's on, you are allowed to use it in a transaction. So for a law firm, this can be really useful because it will allow you to create a class for each associate or a partner. And so in doing that, you can designate on transactions such as invoices, which associate or partner that case is a part of or that transaction belongs to. And so it can just be very helpful. And so we're going to go ahead and actually add 3 partners to our class list. And so if you're tracking with me in the textbook, this is on page 3-28 and 29. So classes is a list, just like the chart of accounts, just like the items list, right? Here's our class list. So we'll go ahead and select class list. Okay. There we go. And so here, as you can see, QuickBooks has given us default classes, right? And because it knows it's a law firm, it's just like, oh, partner or location. And so we're going to actually get rid of these, which you could either delete them or you could actually edit them. So let's do an edit. So I've got the partner/location number highlighted. Again, you have to go down to the bottom of the screen like we've been doing on our list, click on class, and click edit class. So the first partner I want to add is Deborah Wood. So I'm simply going to replace the class name with her. And then I'm going to click OK. And now this says Deborah Wood. You can also just delete what QuickBooks has done, right? So you highlight it, class, delete class, and click OK. Okay. So now we've got 2 more partners that we want to add. So we'll go class new. We're going to add Jonathan Graham. And I can just click next and add the last person, which is Natalie Chapman. And so we'll click OK. So now, as you can see, we've got all 3 of our partners or associates listed here. And so now that they have been added to the class list, we can actually use them in a transaction. So this webinar is primarily focused on setting up. So that's why we didn't really go into how you record transactions, but all of that is laid out in our textbook, Mastering QuickBooks for Law Firms. But I just want to show you how you would use a class. So let's say I was going to go in and create an invoice to bill a client, right? So what's nice is the class field is located in 2 places. So if I don't have clients yet, but if I click this class field, as you can see in the drop down, we've got the 3 folks that we added. So if you want to associate the entire invoice to one person, then you would select the class up here, and then that person would be assigned to every line item in the invoice. But if you have multiple partners or associates that are responsible for these line items, then you want to click within the invoice and select next to each line item the person that particular billing item is associated with. And so what's nice about that is you're able to run reports. There's a report called Profit and Loss by Class. And so you could run that to see, what partners or associates are bringing in. And so that's really the benefit of using class tracking. And so that is actually the last topic for our webinar today. So just to recap, it's not my day with this presentation. So just to recap, we've covered how to walk through this easy step interview, how to customize your preferences in QuickBooks, how to customize your chart of accounts list, how to customize your items list, also known as products and services, and how to use class tracking. And so now I would love to know if there's anyone that has any additional questions for us before we wrap up.
We do have a couple questions, Crystalline. The first question is, can you only set QuickBooks up at the beginning of the year? What if I want to start using QuickBooks in the middle of the year? Will that work?
Absolutely. Yeah, the perfect world, right, is, oh, it's January, let's set up QuickBooks, right? But that's kind of not reality. So you absolutely can decide to use QuickBooks in the middle of a year, right? So if I decided now, hey, I want to start using QuickBooks and I don't want to go back to the beginning of the year, my recommendation would be that you start at the beginning. So June is the last month of the quarter, right? So I would finish out June in whatever system I'm using. And then as of July 1st, that's kind of a good cutoff, I would use QuickBooks. So to answer your question, absolutely. You can start using QuickBooks whenever you like. It's just really dependent on how much information you have time to enter or are willing to enter into QuickBooks in terms of going back to the beginning of the year or just starting right now from where you are. So yeah.
Okay, and to sort of piggyback off of that one, if you enter time during the month, can you then capture all of that and create an invoice with time already entered in for a particular client?
Absolutely. Yep. So when you're entering time, you're going to enter it, and I think we covered this in chapter 4 or 5, but you're going to enter it, you're going to designate the client, you're going to designate the partner or who worked the time, all of that jazz in the time tracking section. And then when you get ready to invoice the client, what's cool is when you go into QuickBooks and say, hey, create invoice, when you select that client, you're going to get a pop-up that says you have unbilled transactions. Would you like to bill them now? And then you select the time that you want to include on that invoice. So absolutely, you can do that.
Okay, and on the bill for a client, can it show the balance in their trust account?
On the invoice to the client? No.
Yes. No.
No, it does not. Unfortunately, QuickBooks doesn't do that automatically.
Okay. Next question. Can you assign different rates to each class so it populates that information automatically?
Yes. Yes, you can. There's something called billing rates, and you can go in and set up billing rates, right, for each person, right? Because partners probably definitely have a different billing rate from an associate. So yes, you can use, the feature is called billing rates.
All right. It looks like that is the last question, but for those of you that attended, I'll be sending you an email with this PowerPoint just so you have our email. So if there's something that you wanted to ask us and forgot or think of later, feel free to respond to that email that I send, or you can reach out to the sales@tlr-inc.com email that's on your screen right now.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Morgan. And again, thank you very much for everyone that attended the webinar. We appreciate it. And yeah, definitely shoot your follow-up questions to that email. We'll be happy to answer them. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.